Earlier this week, I talked about how America ended up so polarised. I talked about the techniques that political strategists and campaigners have been using, including creating an artificial fear of what the other side will do to you, using quotes and information out of context, and generally playing to human psychology in a way to manipulate you without you even noticing. Today, I'm going to show how similar principles get used in a related but different context, in the YouTube influencer context on the issues of the moment. And I'm focusing on the one that has studied persuasion techniques most actively, uses them most consistently, and to great effect. And that is someone I've discussed before, which is Tony Heller. So let's jump into it. Whereas in the past I've critiqued some specific videos that Tony Heller's produced, in this video I'm going to focus on his persuasion techniques. Things that he consistently does over and over again to, frankly, fool his audience into accepting loaded propositions. Heller is a big fan of Scott Adams, who talks and writes about persuasion techniques, and who credited Tony Heller as being the most advanced practitioner of persuasion techniques on the side of anti-climate policy messaging. They fell out ultimately when Adams noted that, in spite of the persuasion techniques, Heller's conspiracy-based messages were not credible. Recognising the power of someone's technique isn't, of course, the same as buying their argument. We're going to start looking at this video that he produced recently where he talked about the World Economic Forum. In the video, Heller begins by setting the scene that he's about to unveil some truly Orwellian truths. And he goes on to this article, a blog post on the website of the World Economic Forum. Let's see what he says about it.
Here's an article from the World Economic Forum from September. Emissions fell during lockdown. Let's keep it that way. And they include a picture of a nearly empty freeway. They're saying that they want to keep the freeways empty permanently, which means they want you locked up in your home. Let's look at the headline again. Emissions fell during lockdown. Let's keep it that way. There's nothing subtle about this. They want the lockdowns to be permanent.
The video takes a structure that Heller often uses for his videos. An initial opening premise which sneaks through a straw man proposition, followed by an attack on the straw man, often leading to an expansion on the theme, and then the final thoughts that he wants to leave you with. In this case, Heller sets up the premise for his video that this article is arguing for permanent lockdowns, and that this is the policy position of the World Economic Forum. Now, is that true, or is it a straw man? Let's check by looking at the original article. The first thing to note is that the article is not editorial by the World Economic Forum itself. It's an opinion piece by Alison Martin, who is the Chief Executive Europe, Middle East and Africa for the Zurich Insurance Group. It's hard to understand how it would serve Zurich Insurance Group's business model to have everyone locked down. COVID-19 lockdowns have been pretty disastrous for insurance companies for obvious reasons. Reuters noted that insurers have been hit across the board by pandemic-related claims for issues related to travel, business interruption and event cancellation, as well as life insurance. The article was originally published on the Forbes website, and it's not clear why Forbes would want you locked down either. And of course, when you look at it, the article says no such thing. For sure, it says that global warming is an absolutely key issue that we need to address, a position that Heller would disagree with. Maybe you would as well. But you probably still want to know the truth of what the article says, not to be misled. I've given a link to the full article in the video description below. It says this: as governments, businesses and individuals focus on restoring economies and livelihoods, it's too easy to be stuck on the notion that the old unsustainable practices are the only practical option, with green now merely a nice to have. The recovery from COVID-19 is not a choice between economic recovery versus a green agenda, but an opportunity to achieve one with the other. We must take decisions in the firm belief that embedding green policies can be a catalyst for economic growth, while having a positive impact on our health and well-being. Well, it doesn't sound like wanting people to be locked up. Economic recovery isn't really compatible with COVID lockdown. I mean, is it? You can disagree with her argument. That's free speech in action. there's an intelligent counter case to be made. Heck, I might even make it, at least on some of the details. But Heller doesn't do that. Instead, he misrepresents the argument. You would think that what he suggests would be dismissed by everyone as utterly absurd. Why on earth would rich capitalists think that everyone being locked up at home was in their interest? In the history of capitalism, when has that ever been a thing? It doesn't make sense. But we live in a conspiratorial counterculture moment. So he has a solid basis for believing that a proportion of people will happily believe the most absurd stuff that he can feed them. And he does this a lot, setting up an initial proposition with a straw man, depending on the fact that his supporters won't check for themselves. He blocked me from commenting on his YouTube channel after he did a video starting with yet another article.
Satellite images show deterioration of Antarctica glaciers that could lead to rising sea levels. The vast majority of Antarctica never gets above freezing, but according to climate experts, it's melting. Facebook and ABC News are blaming something which has been going on for centuries on your sport utility vehicle.
And again, if you looked at the article he linked to, it made no such suggestion. It didn't make a connection with climate change at all in that specific instance. But it was just stated as a fact. Clearly didn't want the likes of me pointing out the truth to his followers. The point is, he uses certain techniques over and over. If you're aware of them, you can watch for some of them yourself in some of his future videos.
Now let's look at the parking lot from the last World Economic Forum meeting. The very rich people in the World Economic Forum are not locked down. They're flying their private jets all over the world. I've been saying for years that these people don't want you causing traffic jams on the freeways, and they certainly don't want you clogging up the security line at the airport.
He then points out that rich people fly places, which is a shocker, obviously. It would be perfectly fair comment to point to hypocrisy if people fly places and preach to others not to fly. We don't know that the owners of those planes were there to do that sort of preaching, but as far as Heller is concerned, this is all one homogeneous group. He does this throughout this video and throughout his video narratives over the years. He makes his case by pretending there is one group. It could be called so-called climate alarmists, or in this case globalists, and that means that you can take whoever, whatever is the worst example that anyone has done, attribute them to the group, and use it to damn anyone who has an opinion in that group. So here he's taken one article in a discussion blog and told you that it's the World Economic Forum telling you to lock down. It's not true, but then he can compare it with unconnected other rich people not locking down. It's a straightforward persuasion technique based on the powerful us versus them dynamic. It's very effective. It's just not very honest.
And they are becoming quite bold about their plans. Here's a story out of the UK today. High-value business travelers will soon be exempt from the UK's coronavirus quarantine rules, the Transport Secretary has announced. It's pretty clear that the animals with lots of money are much more equal than the rest of us. George Orwell wrote his novels as a warning, but globalists have adopted them as their operating manual.
They are becoming quite bold about their plans, he said. Now we switch to another unrelated group, being tied in with the shadowy, nefarious body that has plans. It's the Conservative UK government, who are somehow tied into the same all-encompassing them. In fact, the UK government was trying, rightly or wrongly, to undo some of the damage the clumsy lockdowns have been doing to the business community, which can't do international business if every business trip is going to involve a 14-day quarantine. It's obvious to anyone without a head full of conspiracies that's what this policy is about. But for Heller, this can be plucked out of the air and presented as more evidence that they want to keep you locked down. You would think he could have just argued that there shouldn't be one rule for the rich and another for the rest. That would have been a perfectly valid argument, a perfectly popular one. Of course, lots of examples. We can observe on a regular basis hypocritical politicians and others in a position of privilege preaching one thing and doing another. Absolutely fair game for trenchant criticism. But what he says here is that they, this group that he's invented, are deliberately following policies to keep you locked down. He's trying to persuade you by stringing together a bunch of unconnected things and just stating boldly, without any evidence at all, that they're all connected. But you just absorb the message without even noticing its inherent absurdity.
There's nothing new about what's going on now. Globalists have been planning this for decades. Here's an article from The Guardian and the Canberra Times from 1989. Governments must yield national sovereignty to multilateral authorities able to enforce laws across environmentally invisible frontiers if the greenhouse effect, which threatens the future of whole nations, is to be overcome, the Commonwealth Secretary General said on Tuesday.
Globalists have been planning for decades. Well, have they, Tony? Here he presents a randomly selected article from the Canberra Times from 1989 where Sir Sridhar Rampal expressed an opinion in favour of global governance. Not a huge surprise, he went on to become a co-chair of the Commission on Global Governance alongside Swedish Prime Minister Ingvar Carlsson in 1995. They produced a report, Our Global Neighbourhood. It was savaged by many groups at the time, free speech being in action. It's a vision of a strengthened United Nations, and it has made no headway since. Rampal is a Guyanese politician. He was the foreign minister of Guyana from 1972 to 1975. You've never heard of him? He's not in charge of anything. Tony Heller wants you to believe he's a member of his secret group of globalists that stretches from Guyanese politicians to chief executives of global insurance companies via the UK government and has been making plans since 1979 to get you to lock down. Although this random figure has no links with the World Economic Forum, somehow he's tied in to this random blog post in 2020. Once you've snuck your initial strawman proposition past people, this is the sort of game you can play. You can pluck any random quote from the past, and deep mining the past for random quotes is what Tony Heller does best to disprove what nobody claimed in the first place. An alternative view might be that in the face of global problems, a lot of people have argued we need better global governance to address them. Personally, I disagree with many of the arguments, although there are some good points mixed in there as well, like every complex problem. But we believe in a world where people can express their ideas and make their case, which is what he did in 1979. Tony Heller agreed to that position when he's defending himself against YouTube censorship. We are in agreement on that. I am against YouTube censorship, against Tony Heller or anyone else, something I've said here many times. But he thinks that globalists expressing an opinion in 1979 isn't someone expressing a view in a public forum with which we can agree or disagree. It's evidence of a global conspiracy of whoever he decides is a member of the club to keep you locked in your homes.
And right now, Donald Trump is the only thing standing between us and our slave masters at the World Economic Forum. These people want their private jets and their wonderful lifestyles. At the same time, they want you locked up in your home. This has nothing to do with climate or a virus. These people want you off the roads and they want you out of the airports. Joe Biden and John Kerry are completely on board with these globalist plans to destroy America. Here's a good article from The Hill this week. John Kerry reveals Biden's devotion to radical Great Reset movement. The Great Reset means taking away your freedom, your civil rights, your money, and your lifestyle.
Then he pivots to his political message. Having defined his terms, he can pretend when other people use the same terms, they really mean it in the way that he's defined, which is a neat trick. Many Republicans would agree, of course, with the caricature of what Joe Biden wants, just as Democrats paint ridiculous caricatures of what Trump supporters want. He knows that people will happily believe the worst of their opponents, so exaggerating the things that they already fear is one of the most effective ways to persuade people. Very often, he will not only describe what somebody does, but why they are doing it. He mind reads their opinions, tells you what they want, why they're against you. It's what I described in the previous video, how each side demonizing the other has pushed America to the brink. And, it's a game that both sides play. But here, Heller wants you to go deeper in your own side. Not that your political opponents have the wrong ideas, but that they are just basically evil. There are good reasons to be concerned. I talk about those often. I rather suspect I will be talking about them quite a bit more. The question is whether you fall for the manipulation. because of all the manufactured outrage. It doesn't take us to a place where we want to go. Conspiracy theorists like to say, follow the money. Well, most of the private jet owners of the World Economic Forum make their money when people in prosperous societies buy what they make. Some, like Elon Musk, make their money from cars. So it's odd if he wants the roads to be empty. The whole point of his cars is that you can continue to be on the freeway in spite of climate change. Another part of the persuasion toolbox, as described by the founders of Campaigns Inc. that I mentioned in the last video, is repetition. You have to simplify your message and then repeat it numerous times for it really to stick. And this is a standard part of the Heller approach. Once he's introduced an original argument, he'll then continue to drop it into subsequent videos, reminding you of his contention over and over, knowing that the repetition will mean the idea of it will stick long after the detail of the claim has faded away. So this is what he put into a second video.
I'm going to get back to that in a minute, but first let's take a look at who the World Economic Forum is. They're a group of very rich and powerful people who fly into Switzerland once in a while on their private jets. And they're quite open about the fact that they want all of the little people locked up in their homes. They say emissions fell during lockdown, let's keep it that way, and they have a picture of a nearly empty freeway. They want to fly all over the world in their private jets, and they want you to stay home.
Leonardo da Vinci used to have a reputation that he could be in a room with you and he would explain his latest schemes or his fantastic out-of-this-world inventions, and it would only be once he'd left the room that the impossibility of what he'd been saying would eventually become evident. Tony Heller wants you to believe fantastic, ridiculous things. He's an expert and a smart communicator, and most of his fans nod along and simply don't notice the absurdity of his propositions. That's nothing to do with how smart people are or otherwise, by the way. Smart people are just as suggestible to hypnotic suggestion. Ask Scott Adams, that's something that he said before. I believe people should always question, always look at the evidence, especially in the difficult times that we're in now. But I also see evidence that these sorts of manipulation techniques are highly effective for a certain audience. So, some of the manipulation techniques we've identified. 1. Setting up an initial proposition based on a blatant misrepresentation, on the basis that if you're already a fan, you won't check the original source. Whether it's suggesting there's one big group of climate alarmists who say that there's never been hot weather in the past.
And every time someplace gets hot now, climate alarmists scream that it's unprecedented and it's caused by carbon dioxide.
Or that the World Economic Forum wants to keep you locked down just for giggles, or whatever it may be. 2. Drawing lines of guilt by association. If you can make a homogeneous group out of actually completely unconnected people, then you can cherry pick whatever quotes you like and ascribe them all to the same group, pretending that what a Guyanan politician said in 1979 is directly linked to what the CEO of an insurance firm said in 2020. 3. Telling you other people's intentions to set up a fake us versus them dynamic and to pull you into his version of us. Us versus them is one of the most powerful psychological dynamics in human history. And we have a heck of a one in America right now. Tony Heller is clearly a very smart person, but he's not a mind reader. What you'll notice if you watch a number of Heller's videos is that he uses those techniques over and over again. 4. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Tony doesn't do nuance. He doesn't do half measures. It works very well for him, but it's part of the black and white caricature that's manipulating America. 5. And you'll also notice a lot of repetition. Sometimes even his fans comment on the amount of repetition, but it's a technique that does its work whether you enjoy it or not. Like the way that some of the most annoying advertisements can actually stay with you better than the rest. That's also deliberate technique. So there we are. Misrepresent, create an artificial us versus them narrative, mind read the bad intentions of strangers, simplify, repeat. And then in addition to cherry picking his graphs, which we've discussed often in the past, Tony Heller uses all of these techniques, and so do a number of others, let's be clear. In her book Manipulation, Theory and Practice, Anne Barnhill defined manipulation as when someone tries to alter behaviour in a covert way by hiding or at least not revealing an important aspect of a relevant interaction. There are serious issues to be debated and resolved. Some of the most difficult conflicts we've ever seen right now. There are also more people than ever before trying to manipulate what you think about them, not on the basis of the facts and the logical arguments that follow from those facts, or honestly expressed values that are held in the knowledge of those facts. Instead, they are about misrepresentation and the use of hypnotic techniques to manipulate what you think. And, the left do it, the right do it, even educated fleas. Oh no, wait, that's something else. If you've ever wondered, how can some on the left believe that men can be women? If you've ever wondered, how can some on the right believe that a think tank is about to enslave the world? Wherever you see magical thinking, there's a lot of people passionately believing in it, angrily asserting it. Some combination of the factors discussed here has been involved somewhere along the line. We don't have to fall for it.